on the shores of Labadi Beach, where the ocean carries not just salty water, but deep secrets. A tiny glass bottle drifting among the debris changed the life of a poor boy forever. It was more than a letter. It was an echo of hope, a friendship crossing oceans, and a journey toward light in the darkest times. This story will grip you so tightly, you won't be able to look away. It will squeeze your heart with emotion and ignite within you the relentless flame of belief in miracles. Join us on this incredible journey. But first, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an authentic, moving, and inspiring story from us. Morning breaks over Labadi Beach, not like a beginning, but like a memory that refuses to fade. The waves come in slow, steady like breath. And all along the shore, the world shines, not with beauty, but with broken things. A child's sandal, a torn plastic doll, crushed water bottles with faded logos from places Ni could never pronounce. The sea spits them out in silence, and the silence is filled with ghosts. But then footsteps, not rushed, not idle, purposeful. Bare feet slap softly on damp sand. And then a voice, quiet at first, almost a whisper, starts to echo among the dunes and debris. A B, C, D. The voice belongs to a boy no older than 13. His dark skin gleams in the low sun, and his clothes, once maybe a school uniform, hang in faded patches. In one hand, a rice sack already half filled with crushed plastic. In the other, nothing yet. He's busy reciting, eyes squinting, lips moving fast as he fumbles through the alphabet. His name is Ni, and this is his classroom, Labadi Beach, Accra, Ghana. The only blackboard is the sky, and the only bell is the tide. He stops when he sees a large bottle still intact, lodged between a driftwood plank and a clump of seaweed. He runs to it, kneels, inspects it. No cracks, no worms, no oil. Just a Coca-Cola label half peeled and the sound of air trapped inside. With the precision of someone who does this every day, Ni slips it into his sack. F, G, H. He mutters again, picking up the rhythm. His voice is bright, but his eyes are ancient. The kind of eyes that know more about weight than wonder. Behind him, a rustling sound, then a bark. Low, cautious, familiar. A white dog, small in gaunt pads, slowly toward him. Her head low, tail wagging once, then curling in. One ear is missing the stump healed long ago, and one of her hind legs limps from an old injury. But her eyes are alert, trained on the boy's bag. You again, eh? Ni says without turning. He tosses a crust of dry bread from his pocket to the sand. The dog waits, doesn't pounce until Ni steps back, nodding. She eats like she's used to hunger. Ni calls her Sogo, a name he doesn't remember inventing. She's not his dog, no one's dog. But every morning she finds him. And every night she disappears. By the third bottle, the sun has risen higher. It bathes the beach in a golden haze, making the broken glass shimmer like treasure. A few meters down the shore, a couple of boys, older, stronger, are scouring the sand too. But they ignore Ni. He's too small to compete, too poor to be worth stealing from, and too stubborn to quit. He works silently, his lips now moving to form full sentences he can't pronounce. My name is Ni. I live by the sea. His English is sharp in some places, cracked in others, like the bottles he carries. The beach curves. Beyond it, a row of makeshift stalls begins to stir. One of them, a plywood box with a faded umbrella, is his grandmother's. She sells coconut water there when she can, slicing the green fruit with a cutlass almost as old as her. Today she's not there, and he knows why. The cough came back last night, and the fever. Again. He had wanted to stay. But she pushed him out the door at dawn, her voice hoarse. Ni, go. The bottles don't wait for sick people. So he came. By bottle number 8, he's sweating. Not from heat, though the sun is cruel already, but from pressure. There's a buyer waiting 2 neighborhoods away who pays slightly more per kilo if the bottles are sorted by color. But Ni can't read the logos. He guesses from the shade of green, the touch of blue. The 9th bottle is cracked, He curses softly, kicks the sand. Then he stops, dead in his tracks. In front of him, half buried in the sand like a secret, lies a glass bottle unlike any other on the beach. Not plastic, not commercial, not branded. It's thick, sea glass green, a cork still sealed at the top. Inside something white, folded. A letter. His heart skips. He bends down slowly, eyes darting as if someone might snatch it away. His fingers tremble as he lifts it, shakes the sand off. Inside, unmistakably, is a sheet of paper creased but dry. And tied around it with a thread like fishing line is a tiny shell. But Nee doesn't open it. Not yet. He stares at the bottle, then at the sky, then at the sea like he's asking for permission. Sogo walks up beside him, noses the bottle, whimpers once. And Nee, just 13 barefoot with sea salt in his hair and the weight of everything in his bones, sits down right there in the wet sand. He pulls the bottle close to his chest. For the first time in weeks, he doesn't think about hunger. For the first time in months, he doesn't think about debt. He just wonders, who would write a letter and send it to the ocean? Was it meant for him, or is he just the next person to hold it? He studies the bottle like it's made of starlight. He doesn't open it. He just holds it. Like maybe the message matters more when it's not yet read. Far down the beach, the older boys laugh, shoving each other, fighting over a half-buried soda crate. Sogo barks once, loud, protective. They don't come closer. The sun climbs. The tide begins to rise. And Nee, still holding the bottle, stands. He brushes the sand from his short shoulders, the sack again, and walks inland. Not to the coconut stall, not to the buyers. To the place he always goes when he finds something that makes his chest feel warm and wrong at the same time. A spot behind the old wooden shack by the fence, his hiding place. There, under a plastic sheet and between two metal tins, he lays the bottle down, gently, like it might break through time itself. Then he whispers to it. Only Sogo hears. "I will learn how to read you, I promise." And for the first time since his mother died, Nee smiles. Not because he's safe, not because he's saved, but because somewhere on some other shore, someone might have written his name, even if they didn't know it yet. The first drop fell at the edge of Nee's cheek like a warning. He didn't flinch. He was crouched by the tide line, sifting through wet seaweed fingers, numb eyes scanning. The ocean was noisier than usual, like it was muttering something urgent. And the wind, it had started whispering too. He had no raincoat, no shoes. Just his usual threadbare t-shirt loose around the neck and a sack already soggy with broken bottles. He should have headed back. His grandmother had said the clouds were swollen with bad news. But Nee had learned long ago, when the sea offers a second round, you don't turn your back. And that's when he saw it. Caught in a tangled nest of palm roots and fishing net lodged beneath a half-buried tire was the bottle, not plastic, not oil-streaked, glass, green, whole. He paused, eyes narrowing. The wind hissed louder now, as if sensing it too. Nee crawled forward, hands deep in the wet sand, pulling gently, carefully, until the glass came free, glistening cold smooth. Unlike anything else on the shore, inside, coiled like a sleeping creature, was a piece of paper, and on it, faint but steady, was handwriting. Small, round, and patient. He stood, bottle in hand, holding it against the shifting sky. Lightning cracked somewhere far off. The sea inhaled. Nee, run. By the time he reached the shack behind his grandmother's stall, the rain had turned vicious. Sogo was already there, curled beneath the crate, where they hid things too precious for thieves and rats. Her fur was soaked, her eyes watching the storm with the weariness of a creature that knew what loss sounded like. Nee ducked under the metal sheet, panting, bottle clutched to his chest like it might vanish if he let go. "Shh," he whispered to himself. His fingers were trembling wet with both sea and sky. He placed the bottle on a flattened cardboard box, wiped it gently, unscrewed the cork. It came loose with a soft gasp. Inside, a rolled-up letter bound with pink thread. His heart beat so hard it made his jaw ache. He pulled the paper out carefully, delicately, like it might turn to dust in his fingers. He unrolled it. The ink had smudged slightly at the edges, but the words, the center, were clear. "To anyone, anywhere, there is ocean. I want to be your friend." The air caught in his throat. He read it again, slower. "To anyone, anywhere there is ocean. I want to be," he whispered the last word, "friend." He didn't know the whole sentence, but he knew what it meant. Someone had thrown their heart into the sea, hoping it would land in another, and somehow through storm and current and miracle, it had landed in his. Nee pressed the letter to his chest. He didn't move for a long time. Rain fell around him harder, angrier, but the world had gone still. Even Sogo had stopped shaking. It wasn't a gift, it was a call. That night, by the flickering light of a dying battery lantern, Nee tried to write back. He had no proper paper, so he used the inside of a discarded sugar sack. He didn't have a pen, just a red pencil stolen from a tourist's drop notebook weeks ago. The pencil broke twice, the paper tore once, but the words came. Hello, I am Nee. I from Ghana. I no have school, but I find your paper in bottle. Thank you. I have one dog. Her name is Sogo. She white. I want friend too. Please you write me again. Thank you. He stared at the words. Crossed out I no have school. Wrote I want to go school. Then he opened the tin box he kept buried behind the shack. Inside was a shell, small, white, shaped like a heart if you tilted it. His mother had found it with him when he was 4. Told him it had music in it. Told him to listen close when the world felt loud. He had never given it to anyone, until now. He tied it to the note using a plastic straw he cut into a thread. Then he found the clearest bottle he had, not the one from the stranger, but one he had kept for months too clean to sell, too perfect to trash. He rolled the note, slipped in the shell, sealed the bottle with wax from the melted lantern lid. The rain had stopped by dawn. The clouds hung low like bruises, but the sea had calmed. Gentle, apologetic, Nee walked barefoot across the shore, bottle in hand. Sogo trailed behind him, her tail flicking the sand. He walked past the tide line, past the broken crate that used to be someone's boat, past the driftwood post he always counted as his finish line. He stood ankle deep in the water, staring out into nothing. Then slowly, reverently, he pulled the bottle to his lips, whispered something into it. Then he turned and pressed his forehead to Sogo's. I gave her our shell, he murmured. The dog licked his cheek once. He smiled. For real this time. And then, with all the strength in his small arms, Nee threw the bottle as far as he could into the rising light. It spun once in the air, caught a glint of sun, and vanished into the mouth of the tide. Sogo barked. The ocean answered with a soft push against Nee's feet. He didn't know what would happen next. Maybe nothing. Maybe the sea would keep it. But maybe, somewhere on a dock in America, or on a beach in Brazil, or even on a ship floating between worlds, someone would read his words and know he existed. That morning he returned to the shack. Soaked. Quiet. His grandmother was already awake, boiling water over charcoal. Rain catch you again? She asked without looking. No, he replied, still barefoot. I catch something else. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. But when he pulled the wet sack of bottles into the corner and began sorting them, green from blue, whole from shattered, he did it, humming a song he hadn't sung in months. Sogo curled up nearby, one eye open, one ear twitching. And on a shore half the world away, the sea tugged a green bottle gently toward its next destination. Not because it knew where it was going, but because it remembered who had sent it. 6 months. That's how long the ocean had remained silent. 6 months since Nee sent his letter in a bottle tucked with a shell and a broken heart into the waiting arms of the sea. Every morning since he had returned to the shoreline. With a quiet ritual step, barefoot to the tide line, let the waves kiss his toes, squint into the dawn light, and wait. Just for a few seconds. Just in case. And every morning, the sea whispered nothing back. Still he kept waiting. It wasn't hope exactly. It was something thinner, quieter, more dangerous. Expectation. The kind that seeps into your bones when the world hasn't crushed you yet. But it's thinking about it. Nee still worked the beach, still sorted green from blue, intact from cracked, still bargained over a few pesewas for bags of glass nobody wanted. But now, between bottles, between steps, between sighs, he was learning. A torn page from a used workbook, soggy, sunburnt, unreadable to most, became his teacher. A flashcard from a discarded tourist's phrasebook, his textbook. Every thank you, every how are you, moms, hi, every I am's fund etched into his breath as if it might carry him somewhere else. At night, when the neighborhood died down and his grandmother drifted to sleep murmuring in her dreams, Nee traced letters into the dirt with a stick, mouthing them to the wind like spells. Friend, Ocean, again. Please, my name is... His grandmother noticed. She didn't say much, but sometimes when the light flickered from the lone lantern, she would stop sharpening her coconut knife and just watch him. Eyes soft, wrinkled hands curled around the edge of her knees, like she saw something distant inside him, something pulling away. And maybe she did. She had been coughing more lately. Not loud, not dramatic, just that dry, choking edge that comes at the end of everything. Once Nee found a bloody rag under her cot. She had hidden it beneath a basin. When he confronted her, she laughed and said she spilled palm oil. He wanted to believe her, but every time she asked him to read aloud, "The girl in the book, a man with a dog, I have one brother," he saw it in her eyes. That sadness that swells when someone realizes they won't be around to see the ending. It was a Tuesday when the fight broke out. The beach was unusually crowded that morning. The tide had brought in a bounty, hundreds of bottles, tangled nets, even a rusted-out shopping cart. Every picker, every scavenger, every boy with a sack had showed up early. Tension hung thick in the air. Nee kept to himself as always. Worked fast, eyes down, fingers calloused from weeks of broken glass. But then he heard it. Raised voices, pushing, someone yelling. "This is our side. You cross again, we fight." He didn't turn. He didn't run. He just bent down for a blue bottle wedged between two stones. That's when someone shoved him hard from behind. He hit the ground face first, air knocked out of his lungs, mouth full of sand. His sack flew open. Bottles scattered. A shadow loomed over him. "You think you own this place?" The boy sneered, older, taller teeth, yellowed from hunger and hate. "You too good to speak, too smart to share." Nee didn't answer. He didn't have time. The boy raised a fist, then a bark. Loud, sharp, defiant. "Sogo." She came from behind a pile of nets, fur-bristled eyes blazing. She didn't hesitate. She leapt between them, snarling teeth bared. The boy froze, half-stepping back. Another shove from behind him, and then a kick. It landed hard against Sogo's jaw. She yelped, crashed into the sand. Blood darkened the white of her muzzle. Nee screamed. Time stopped. He crawled to her hands, trembling voice breaking. "No, no, no, please." He held her head in his lap. She whined. One eye blinked, the other swollen shut. "You didn't have to. You didn't have to save me." The boy was already gone. The others scattered. The fight, like all street wars, dissolved into silence and stares. Only Nee and the bleeding dog remained broken, furious, shaking. That night he didn't go home. He stayed under the shack, wrapped in a frayed blanket. Sogo curled beside him, breathing shallow and uneven. He washed the wound with seawater, dabbed it with salt. She didn't flinch, just stared at him like he was the only thing she still trusted. He whispered stories to her, about the girl in the bottle, about what her name might be, what she might look like. Maybe she had a dog too. Maybe she'd understand. "Maybe she'll come find us," he said softly. "Maybe she'll bring medicine, or a collar, or words we haven't heard yet." Sogo closed her eye. Nee pressed his forehead to hers. "I can't lose you two." By morning, the blood had dried. The swelling remained. But Sogo was standing, and Nee, with cracked lips and hollow cheeks, walked her back to the beach like it was the only road he knew. He didn't pick up bottles that day. He just stood at the water's edge, let the foam touch his toes, let the wind slap his face, and asked the ocean again like he had 1,000 times before. Did she get it? No answer, not yet. But behind him, the echo of that question, small, invisible, stubborn, clung to the air like smoke, waiting to be heard. The fever came in waves. It started with the coughing again, dry at first, then wet, then something deeper, something heavier. The kind of sound that made Nee sit up in the dark and stare at the curtain behind which his grandmother lay, breathing like the wind was trying to claw its way out of her chest. By the end of the week, she couldn't stand. Her hands trembled when she tried to slice coconuts. She dropped the cutlass, once blade embedding into the sand, and that was the moment Nee stopped pretending it was nothing. She said it was just the air, that maybe she'd caught a chill, that tomorrow would be better. Tomorrow wasn't. Tomorrow she didn't open the stall. The clinic was 2 miles away. Nee ran there barefoot with her name scrawled on a paper torn from a sugar bag and came back with a paper bag of pills and a folded sheet with instructions he couldn't read. He paid for both with the last of their savings and a handful of carefully chosen shells he once swore he would never sell. She wouldn't eat, wouldn't speak much, but she'd still watch him silently while he practiced his English at night, and that somehow made it worse. The decision wasn't made out loud, but it was made. Nee stopped going to school. No uniform, no classroom, no chance. He spent every daylight hour combing the beach for bottles. Every pesewa mattered now. Every ounce of glass meant an extra bit of food, or one more packet of paracetamol, or another week of not needing to beg. Sogo followed him always. Her limp was worse in the mornings, but she kept up. At night, she curled around his grandmother's feet like a guardian too tired to stand, but too loyal to sleep. Nee had learned about tourists. He had watched them laugh with mouths too wide. Watched them walk with cameras that cost more than the entire stall his grandmother owned. Watched them pick up seashells and squeal as if they were rare, as if they didn't wash up every day. So he tried. He took his best shells, the ones with gold streaks, the ones shaped like hearts, the ones that whispered when you held them to your ear, and he made necklaces out of old fishing line. Bracelets from soda tabs. He washed them, arranged them neatly on a flattened cereal box, waited near the boardwalk, and he spoke. "Hello, madam. You want beautiful shell for your daughter?" They barely looked at him. Some smiled, lips tight, some waved him off. And one, a tall man with sunglasses and a camera strap slung across his chest, sneered and said, "If you're going to beg, at least speak properly." The words hit harder than a kick. Nee froze. He didn't cry, but he didn't speak again for the rest of the day. He left the shells in the sand and walked back to the shack. The tide had come in. The beach was washing itself clean again. The rains returned that week, not the gentle drizzle of April, not the rhythmic downpour that lulled you to sleep. These rains came with fury. The sky cracked like it had been holding something back too long. Water slammed into the tin roof like fists. The wind screamed. Plastic flew from the trees like haunted flags. The fire pits died. The lights flickered and didn't come back. Nee tried to seal the gaps with rags, tried to hold down the sheets of rusted zinc, but the wind tore through anyway. Their little shelters shuddered with each gust. His grandmother coughed blood that night. He held her hand in the dark and whispered English words she didn't understand. "I will try," he said. "I'm still trying." On the third day of rain, the ocean changed. It didn't roar, it moaned. The beach was no longer a place of work. It became a graveyard. Piles of waste-tangled nets, slick oil patches, and broken glass spread like infection. The smell was sharp, metallic, sour. Sogo barked once and refused to go further, but Nee did. He waded into ankle-deep water mixed with filth and salt, searching not even knowing what for. His sack dragged behind him like a drowned tail. Then he saw it, half buried in mud, crushed but still there. The bottle, the one with the pink thread. The one he had sent months ago. It had come back, or never left. He dropped to his knees, hands clawing at the sludge, pulling it free. The cork was gone. The paper inside soaked, torn, almost unreadable. The shell, the white heart-shaped shell, still there, but chipped now. Cracked down the middle. He held it in his palm, and the sky wept harder. He didn't move, didn't wipe the tears that blended with rain. Sogo stood beside him, whimpering softly, ears flat. He pressed the paper to his chest like it was a wound. And then he whispered, not to the sea, not to the sky, but to her. "Emdatinchi sedin." It was the first time he spoke in his mother tongue in weeks. His voice cracked. He said it again, softer. "Emdatin." The bottle slipped from his hand, rolled back into the water, floated a moment, and then disappeared under the foam. He didn't follow it. He just sat in the wreckage of everything, in the stink of rotting seaweed and plastic, surrounded by dreams that never left the shore. Later that night, in the faint flicker of a candle stub, he unfolded the ruined paper again. The ink had melted. Only one word still clung to the surface. "Friend." He traced it with his fingertip. And for the first time, he asked the question he had never dared say aloud. What if no one's coming? The shack was leaking from 6 different corners. His grandmother was unconscious. Sogo's side was rising and falling fast shallow. And the only thing still dry in the world was that one word. Friend. Morning did not come with sunlight. It came with silence, not peace. Just the kind of silence that hums with defeat. Nee stood outside in the thick gray light, holding the cracked shell in his palm. He looked at the sea calm now, as if it had nothing to apologize for, and he said it once more. Not as a whisper, not as a wish, as a fact. Amdatinchi said in. Then he turned and walked back into the dark. The ballroom wasn't grand by Western standards, just a tiled terrace beneath a canvas canopy overlooking the beach. But for Ella Miller, age 10, it felt like a stage. The sea glimmered behind her. Lanterns floated above. A crowd of about 50 people, mostly expats, NGO volunteers, and hotel staff looked up expectantly as she stepped to the microphone. She was small, her voice smaller still, but her hands didn't shake. One of them held a folded piece of paper. The other, gently cradled to her chest, held something more delicate, a white seashell, heart-shaped, with a faint crack running down its curve. My name is Ella, she said, her accent round and soft like the East Coast. And I want to tell you why I'm here. The breeze caught the edge of her skirt. She didn't flinch. 6 months ago, I found a bottle in the Atlantic Ocean. I was on a ferry with my dad, and I saw it floating by. It wasn't trash, it was intentional. She paused, looked down at the shell, then back at the guests. There was a note inside. Someone named Nee, from Ghana. He said he wanted to be friends. He said he had a dog, and he said thank you. A murmur rippled through the audience. Curiosity, amusement, admiration. Ella's grip on the microphone tightened. I didn't know who he was. I still don't. But I've been thinking about him every day. Wondering if he's okay. Wondering if he's still waiting for a reply. She held up the shell. This came in the bottle. I brought it back. Because maybe he's real. Silence fell. It wasn't awkward. It was heavy, the kind of silence people rarely give a child, unless what she's saying feels impossibly old. Ella looked toward the water. Somewhere out there, a boy put this in the ocean, hoping someone would find it. And I did. So now I'm here to find him back. Her parents stood in the back row, Brian and Monica Miller. Both sunburnt, both blinking faster than normal. They weren't new to Ghana. Brian was a marine biologist working on coastal waste studies. Monica ran social outreach for an education nonprofit. But tonight, they were just parents stunned by the force of their daughter's belief. After the applause, they gathered near the reception table with the hotel manager, a Ghanaian man in a navy blazer. He was picking bottles, you said, the man asked. Ella nodded. He said he lived by the sea. He didn't have school, but he wrote English. He said his dog was white. The manager raised an eyebrow. Many children pick bottles here. That's not a lot to go on. But he sent a shell, Ella said. A real one. And a kind letter. Someone that thoughtful. Someone who writes something like that. He can't just disappear. Monica leaned in. We're willing to pay for transportation, or time, if you can ask your staff if anyone's heard of a boy named Nee. The manager hesitated. Then said, I'll see what I can do. For the next 5 days, they searched, not with posters or bullhorns. Ella had insisted. He wouldn't come out for noise, she said. He'd watch, from far away. We have to look quiet. So they went stall to stall, beach to beach, asking gently, showing the shell, describing a boy with sharp eyes and a quiet dog. Some people shrugged, some laughed. One woman said, Nee, that's half the boys in Accra. Another boy said, if he had a dog, someone probably took it already. Ella said nothing to that, but her hand didn't leave the shell all day. On the 6th day, they drove out to a quieter stretch of Labadi Beach, away from the resorts, away from the tourists. The sky was silver with cloud, the air thick with sea rot and dust. A boy on a rusted bicycle pointed them toward the fishing shacks beyond the dunes. But no Nee, no dog, no reply. At sunset, Ella sat cross-legged in the sand, the shell in her lap, silent. Her parents stood nearby, giving her space. Brian turned to Monica. We've tried everywhere. Every name. Every kid with a sack. We can't tell her to stop. Monica murmured. Not after that speech. They watched their daughter so small against the curve of the ocean. She's going to break if we don't find him. Back at the hotel, Ella refused dinner. She curled up with the shell under her cheek, whispering something to it barely audible. I really came. The next morning was warm and windless. Ella asked to walk alone just once more near the abandoned stalls. Her parents followed at a respectful distance, hearts low with the weight of goodbye. She wandered past rotted coconut husks, tarps flapping like forgotten sails, the echoes of voices from the market fading behind her. And then a bark, short, loud, from somewhere behind a collapsed shack. Ella froze. Her heart stuttered. Another bark. Closer now. She turned slowly, the shell still in her hand. A white dog limped into view, thin one ear, torn muzzle marked with old blood. Ella didn't move. The dog stared at her. She whispered Sogo. The dog growled softly, not angry, cautious, curious. Then a boy appeared behind her, no older than 12, barefoot, dark skin smeared with ash and sand eyes, wide eyes ancient. He didn't say anything. Ella didn't breathe. Her parents were still yards away. Then the dog walked forward, slowly, sniffed Ella's hand, sniffed the shell, and wagged its tail once. Ella smiled like a crack of sunlight through a storm cloud. You're real, she whispered. Nee took a step back. He looked like a cornered animal, like Hope had just walked up and punched him in the chest. You're the girl. Ella nodded. And you're Nai. He didn't nod, didn't move. Just looked at the shell in her palm, then at the scar on Sogo's muzzle, then back at her. He said nothing, but his eyes, they filled with tears before he even knew they had. Brian and Monica caught up seconds later. They saw the dog first, then the boy, and then their daughter beaming, crying, holding a shell like it was a prophecy fulfilled. Brian whispered, Is it really him? Ella didn't look away from Nee. She just said, It's him. I know it. Nai spoke finally, his voice hoarse, his accent thick. I no think you come. Ella stepped forward. I did. He looked down, shook his head. Bottle, come back. The water, bring it back. Ella opened her fist and placed the cracked shell into his hand. No. It brought it to me. The world went quiet the moment they locked eyes. Nee stood stiff in the sun-bleached sand barefoot, holding the cracked shell Ella had returned to him. The sea whispered behind them. The wind tugged at the edge of her shirt, and somewhere in the distance, a market vendor shouted about coconuts, but none of it reached them. He had imagined this moment 100 times, 1,000, and yet nothing he imagined prepared him for the pale girl with freckles on her nose and salt in her lashes, standing in front of him like she had stepped out of the dream he'd buried under the wreckage of hope. Ella didn't speak at first. She didn't have to. She simply reached out slowly, palm up, and offered him a small object from the pocket of her dress. A plastic bottle cap threaded through with thin blue string. Her attempt at a gift. Nee stared at it, then laughed a soft, disbelieving sound, more breath than voice. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out something eerily similar. A necklace made of soda tabs and fishing wire, each piece worn smooth by time and tide. They held their gifts between them, not exchanging, not yet just showing. Proof that across an ocean they'd both been trying. Ella was the first to speak. Not with her voice, but with her phone. She fumbled through her translation app, typed with shaking fingers, then held it up. A female robotic voice spoke Twi, halting mispronounced, but clear enough. I found your letter. I wanted to meet you. Nee blinked hard, then pointed at the screen, smiled, and nodded. He took the phone gently in both hands and typed something back slowly, pausing between letters as if the world might break beneath each one. When the app translated his words into English, it read, I thought I was alone. They walked together, Sogo leading down the worn path that led to the edge of the market and the shack behind the stall where Nee lived. Ella's parents followed, still silent, still reeling. Monica held Brian's hand tightly, her other hand clutching the strap of her bag as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The closer they got, the quieter Ella became. The world outside Nee's life was beginning to show itself. The sagging tarp roof, the stack of wet bottles, the pile of burnt wood from failed fires. Everything smelled of sea and smoke and struggle. Nee stopped at the threshold of the shack. He turned not to block her path, but to ask silently if she really wanted to see. Ella didn't hesitate. She stepped forward, ducked under the tin sheet, and entered the dim shelter with the reverence of someone entering a chapel. It was small, dirt floor, one sleeping mat, a rusted can with toothbrushes, A picture of a woman smiling, head wrapped in gold pinned to the wood wall with a nail. Beneath the picture sat a glass bottle. Inside it, a folded, water-warped piece of paper. And beside it, on a cloth scrap, lay a second white shell, chipped but preserved. Ella dropped to her knees. Her lips quivered, eyes welled. She looked up at Nee, then down at the photo. "Your mother," she whispered. Nee nodded. He knelt beside her. "I write the letter here," he said softly. His accent thick, but his words clear. "She teach me small English, before she—" His voice broke. He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Monica stepped inside next. She took one look at the mat, the worn cooking pot in the corner, and the shadow of grief clinging to the photo, and her throat closed. Brian stood frozen in the doorway. He had read about poverty, documented it, spoke at conferences about sustainability and inequality. But standing there in that fragile pocket of a child's life, staring at a grief too quiet to scream, he forgot every word. Ella touched Nee's hand gently, then pulled her phone out again and typed something. This time the voice said, "You are brave, and you are not forgotten." Nee's lips trembled. He looked at the screen, then at her, and then for the first time he smiled fully. They sat outside the shack after that, in a circle beneath the shade of a bent palm. The wind had slowed. The sea looked tired. Nee pulled out a small cloth pouch made from the lining of a rice sack. He untied the string and handed it to Ella. Inside were 3 bottle caps, red, yellow, and green, with a small wire loop through each. A necklace. He had made it months ago, not to sell, but to give, someday, to someone. Ella took it in both hands, her eyes wide, then looked at him. "Can I put it on?" she asked. He nodded. She slipped it over her head and touched the center cap with her finger like it was a medal. Sogo, watching silently, crept closer. She sniffed Ella's knee, then gently licked her hand. Ella gasped softly, then giggled. Nee laughed too. And just like that, something shifted, invisible but undeniable. A crack in the air had sealed. Monica finally spoke. "We'd like to help," she said, her voice hoarse. "Really help. School, food, shelter, whatever he needs," Brian added. He wrote that letter, learned those words. He never stopped trying. He deserves more than this. Nee didn't understand the words, but he saw their faces, and he saw Ella nodding, reaching for her phone again. She typed, "We want to help, if you want us to." Nee looked at his shack, then at his dog, then at the sea. He didn't answer with words. He reached down, lifted Sogo into his lap, wrapped his arms around her, and looked at Ella. Then nodded once, slow, but certain. That night, for the first time in months, Nee didn't sleep alone. They brought food, clean water, a first aid kit, bandages for Sogo's paw, even a blanket blue soft warm. Ella sat beside him on the mat, the plastic cap necklace around her neck. They talked through the phone, through gestures, through silences that said more than any sentence could. When the lantern flickered low, and the sea exhaled its final breath of the day, Nee reached into the tin box near the corner of the shack and pulled out his only photograph of his mother. He handed it to Ella. She held it gently, then whispered she would be proud. Nee looked at her parents outside watching over them like anchors, at Sogo asleep between them, and finally at the bottle on the shelf, the shell still glowing faintly in the dark. He nodded. "I think she is." The morning sun barely pierced through the thick blanket of gray clouds hanging low over Labadi Beach. The air was heavy, not just with humidity, but with whispered doubts and unspoken suspicions. News of the American family's involvement with Nee and the white dog Sogo had spread faster than the tide's retreat, and the local community buzzed with murmurs that were far from welcoming. At the marketplace near the beach, women sat under torn umbrellas, folding laundry and gossiping in hushed tones. Young men lounged against rusted carts, their eyes sharp with skepticism. The common sentiment was a bitter cocktail of distrust and resentment. They're just here for show," muttered Kofi, a weathered fisherman with creases deeper than the ocean floor etched across his face, filming their stories, making a scene. "They'll leave once the cameras stop rolling," True chimed in, a stall owner whose hands were rough from years of work. "They come with money and smiles, but the people they claim to help stay the same. Nothing changes for us." Nee, unaware of the growing undercurrent of doubt, went about his morning routine, collecting bottles and sifting through debris washed ashore. But the weight of whispered rumors and sideways glances began to press against him, a silent storm brewing just beyond the horizon. The tension escalated when Nee's family sought formal support to secure his future. They approached the local municipal office, hopeful for assistance in registering Nee's identity and facilitating his school enrollment. However, the encounter with the bureaucratic machinery was jarring. Inside the dim, cluttered office, a middle-aged official with sharp eyes and a stern demeanor reviewed the sparse documents presented. The absence of a formal birth certificate was a glaring void. "I'm sorry," the official said bluntly, pushing the papers aside. "Without proper documentation, we cannot process school enrollment or issue identification. This is the law." Nee's grandmother, frail and clutching a tattered shawl, looked down, unable to meet the gaze of the official. Brian, Ella's father, clenched his fists, frustration boiling beneath his composed exterior. "This child deserves a chance," Brian said firmly. "We will cover all expenses, tuition, paperwork, anything necessary. Just give him the opportunity." The official's face hardened. "Procedures must be followed. No exceptions." The standoff lingered, thick with unspoken challenges and rigid regulations, a microcosm of the systemic barriers faced by many, like Nee. That evening, as dark clouds gathered and the first drops of rain began to fall, a palpable sense of unease settled over the beach community. The winds picked up, carrying the scent of salt and impending storm. Back at the shack, Nee and Sogo huddled together beneath a tattered tarp. The storm unleashed its fury, lashing rain against the thin shelter and howling through the makeshift walls. The ground beneath them became slick with mud, and the relentless wind tore at their fragile refuge. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the roof collapsed, sending a cascade of debris and water over the small space. Nee sprang to his feet, water streaming down his face as he scrambled to shield Sogo from the onslaught. The dog whimpered, but remained steadfast, nuzzling his side. The night was a tempest of chaos and fear, but also resilience. In the aftermath, the Millers made a decisive choice. Recognizing the immediate danger and instability, they offered Nee and Sogo refuge in their hotel, a sanctuary of warmth and safety away from the harsh elements. The transition was profound. From the cramped, muddy shack to clean sheets and hot meals, Nee's world expanded, yet the shadows of his past clung to him. Ella stayed by his side, a bridge between two worlds. Together they faced the challenges ahead, skeptics, bureaucracy, and the enduring scars of poverty, united by a bond forged across oceans. This storm was more than weather. It was the crucible that would test their resolve and set the stage for the transformation to come. And as the rain washed over Labadi Beach, it carried with it whispers of hope, determination, and the promise that some connections once made cannot be broken. The morning sun spilled gently over the quiet streets near Accra, bathing the small private school in soft golden light. It wasn't a grand building, but to Nee it felt like a palace, a doorway to a new life that had once seemed impossible. Nee stood nervously at the edge of the schoolyard. His heart pounded fast enough to drown out the distant chatter of children playing. He was dressed in his brand-new uniform, a crisp white shirt, navy blue trousers, and polished black shoes that pinched his feet and made his steps cautious. This was not the dusty beach or the broken shoreline where he'd spent most of his life. This was something else, something new. Beside him, Sogo lay quietly under a broad acacia tree, her white fur no longer filthy, but still bearing the scars of their harsh journey. She rested peacefully, her steady breathing a comforting reminder that some things never changed. The ceremony began with the school principal's warm welcome, his voice steady and full of hope. Parents, teachers, and local community leaders filled the small courtyard, watching as children like Nee prepared to start a new chapter. When Nee's name was called, the crowd fell silent. He stepped forward slowly, clutching a certificate, a full scholarship, covering every expense from tuition to books. The weight of that paper felt heavier than any burden he had ever carried, but it was a weight he was proud to bear. Ella stood near the front, her eyes shining with tears of joy. Her parents, Brian and Monica, stood beside her, their faces soft with pride and hope. Later, inside a bright, orderly classroom, Nee sat at a desk with his new book spread before him. The letters and words that once seemed like strangers now began to take shape slowly, awkwardly, but surely. The same English he had struggled to write in crude letters on torn paper was now being taught with patience and care. At his feet, Sogo slept peacefully, an unchanging presence in a rapidly shifting world. In the weeks and months that followed, Ella's family officially launched the Message in a Bottle Scholarship Fund. This new initiative was dedicated to children like Nee, children living along Ghana's shores who had been denied access to education due to poverty and lack of documentation. The fund promised not only tuition and school supplies, but also nutritional support, counseling, and community outreach to help these children thrive. News of the scholarship spread quickly, inspiring support from NGOs, local businesses, and international donors. Children who had once wandered the beaches in search of scraps now had a chance to learn to dream and to build futures beyond the horizon. Nye, once a boy who collected discarded bottles under the harsh sun, became a symbol of hope and determination. His struggle to learn and grow was a testament to the power of human connection, crossing oceans, breaking barriers, and building bridges. On his first day of school, the nervousness and excitement mingled in his chest. Each new word he learned was a victory, every sentence spoken a small triumph. His teachers admired his resilience. His classmates grew curious and warm toward the boy with the quiet strength. Ella remained a constant presence, bringing books and encouragement, becoming a true friend and guide in this new world. Together they formed a bond that transcended continents and circumstances, a bond forged in letters, kindness, and shared dreams. And as the Message in a Bottle Fund grew, so did the number of children stepping confidently into classrooms, eager to write their own stories. Nee's journey was far from over. But the ride to the future had begun, a journey of learning, healing, and hope, carried forward on the waves of an ocean that once brought a simple message and forever changed a life. The salty air of Labadi carried more than just the scent of the ocean. It carried whispers of hope, change, and a future unfolding like the tide itself. Word had spread quickly through the coastal villages about the scholarship fund, Message in a Bottle, and the boy who had become its heart, Nye. Children once resigned to the shoreline now clung to the promise of classrooms and books, their dreams buoyed by his story. Among them was Kofi, a shy boy with bright eyes who had also scavenged the beaches, but had never dared to hope beyond survival. When the scholarship came for him, the whole village celebrated as if the ocean itself had answered their prayers. They called Nee the wave bringer, the one who carried the tide of change from a distant shore into their lives. A symbol that even the smallest bottle cast into the sea could ripple into a vast ocean of transformation. One quiet afternoon, Nee made his way toward a small, weathered cemetery on the outskirts of Labadi. The path was familiar, dusty, winding between tall grass and leaning crosses, but his steps carried new purpose. Sogo padded beside him, tail wagging gently, the white fur catching the fading sunlight. At the center of the cemetery lay a modest grave marked by a simple wooden cross and a faded photograph nailed to a post. It was his grandmother's resting place. Nee knelt, the weight of all he had endured settling around him like the evening shadows. From his pocket he carefully pulled out the small white shell, the one he had kept safe through every storm, every struggle. He placed it gently on the grave beside the photo. His lips parted, voice barely a whisper carried by the breeze. "I've written the next chapter, from the sea." Tears slipped down his cheeks, but his eyes shone with something stronger: gratitude, love, and the quiet strength to keep moving forward. Sogo nuzzled his hand, a steady presence as always. Meanwhile, across thousands of miles and time zones, Ella faced her own crossroads. The day of her departure back to America was heavy with emotion. The small airport terminal buzzed with activity, but the air between Ella and Nee was thick with unspoken words and aching hearts. Tears flowed freely as they embraced one last time, a bond forged in letters, journeys, and shared dreams that no distance could sever. Before leaving, Ella handed Nee an old but functional camera wrapped in a worn cloth. "This is for you," she said softly. "To tell your story, to capture the waves you're bringing." Nee clutched at a new tool to document not just his life, but the lives of others like him, those who chased hope from the shore. Their farewell was not an end, but a beginning. A promise to keep connecting, to keep sharing. Back on the beach, the sun dipped low, casting long golden rays over the water. Nee stood watching, camera in hand, Sogo at his side. The ocean whispered secrets in the twilight, carrying with it the echoes of past struggles and the promise of futures yet unwritten. And with every wave that broke against the shore, Nee knew he was not alone. He was part of something bigger, a tide that could not be turned back. The sun had barely risen over Labadi Beach, painting the horizon in streaks of amber and pink. The cool morning breeze carried the salt scent of the ocean, mingled with the faint rustle of palm fronds. On the shore, Nee stood barefoot in the sand, a handheld camera gripped firmly in his hands, the soft hum of waves crashing behind him. Around him, a group of children moved rhythmically, picking up discarded plastic bottles and cans, their laughter echoing as they learned English words from their teacher. Some pointed excitedly at the camera, their faces lighting up with curiosity and pride. They were not just picking up trash. They were reclaiming their futures, one word, one bottle, one step at a time. Nee adjusted the camera's focus, the lens capturing every detail. The sun-kissed skin of the children, the glint in their eyes, the worn sandals half buried in sand. He was documenting more than a scene. He was capturing a story of resilience, hope, and transformation. He raised the camera to record himself. His voice steady yet soft, laced with the weight of all he had lived through. "The ocean once brought me a friend," he began, eyes scanning the horizon, voice tinged with both nostalgia and determination. A message inside a bottle floating across the waves, carrying a dream. He paused, the breeze brushing against his face, the sound of children's voices filling the space between his words. "Now I want to send that message back to the world." In every shell, every bottle, every dream caught between the tides, a reminder that connection can cross any ocean. Behind him, Sogo, his loyal dog, trotted playfully along the water's edge, nose to the ground, tail wagging with quiet joy. The camera swung to catch her in motion, her white fur glowing softly in the dawn light. Nee's gaze returned to the lens, a small smile breaking through the layers of struggle etched on his face. "I want the world to know, no matter where you come from, no matter what storms you face, there's always a way to reach out, to be heard, to be seen." The video shifted perspective, showing the children laughing as they held up colorful flashcards, reciting words with growing confidence. The sea stretched endlessly behind them, a constant companion to their efforts. In a final poignant shot, the camera zoomed in on a floating glass bottle drifting gently on the tide. Inside, a photograph glowed in the filtered light, a snapshot capturing the bond between Nee and Ella, the faithful presence of Sogo, and the delicate white shell that had started it all. The bottle caught the sunlight, shimmering as it was carried slowly away by the waves, a symbol of journeys, connections, and the enduring power of hope. As the screen faded to black, Nee's voice echoed one last time. "The sea brought me a friend. And now I want to send that back to the world in every shell, every bottle, every dream."